everyone. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you some pen techniques that you can use. Everyone should have a Uniball waterproof pen in their art kit. If you don't, you can use any pen that you have around the house. And if you're getting really into doing pen work, I would recommend getting a set of Micron pens, which are another one of the pens that I absolutely love working with. So I'm going to be showing you some basic techniques today. These are some of the techniques that I am going to go over. I'm going to actually adjust this a little bit more so you guys can see everything a little bit better. Okay, so these are some of the basic techniques I'm going to go over. So stippling or pointillism, hatching, dashes or broken up hatching, cross hatching, scribbling, I know, scribbling, but it's intentional scribbling, okay, and scumbling. Another thing I'm going to show you is how to create value with pen. So value is the darkness and lightness within an image when you shade it. And artists like to use value to create the illusion of depth or to make their work look more realistic or three-dimensional, okay? So you can already see here that I have some examples of how to show value. Darker areas and lighter areas just using some pen techniques, and I am going to show you that now. Okay, so you've got your pen, you've got your piece of paper. I'm just going to test my pen out, make sure it's working well. Good. Okay, we're going to just start out right now with sorry, let me get this thing adjusted correctly. All right, we're going to just start out right now with hatching, okay? So it's spelled H-A-T-C-H-I-N-G, okay? Hatching. Hatching is just when you're simply creating lines that go in one direction together, okay? And this could be horizontal lines, this could be vertical lines, okay? But they're all going one direction, all right? So that's hatching. Now, cross hatching is when the lines intersect. So you go one direction, okay? But then you go another direction, okay? And maybe you even go over it again diagonally, okay? Now to create value with both of these techniques, like with hatching, you're just gonna create more lines in one area where they're overlapping, and then you're gonna kind of let them fade out, okay? With cross hatching, you're just going to create more hatching in certain areas if you want it to be darker, okay? So I'm just going to overlap the hatches, okay, to create some areas that are darker. Next technique, stippling, pointillism, okay? So stippling it's a technique that's used for artwork under the category of pointillism, which is when artwork is made out of a ton of dots, okay? And you've probably seen the work by George Seurat, A Day at the Park, and if you haven't, I'm happy to show you guys, but it's made out of a bunch of tiny little dots, and it's really hard to tell from far away unless you look up close, okay? So with stippling, you're just using those dots, okay? And if you want to create value, okay, darks and lights, okay, you'll create a ton of dots in certain areas. Okay, so now I'm creating a bunch of little dots, okay, and then for lighter areas, you just let the dots fade out, okay? All right, so that's stippling and pointillism. Next thing I'm going to show you, you've probably heard me talk about with other art materials, scumbling, okay? A lot of people mistake this for scribbling. It is not scribbling. You are going in a circular motion, okay? So this is scumbling. Notice I'm going in a circular motion, okay? If you want certain areas to be dark, same thing. You just go over those areas, over and over again to make them nice and dark. Okay, scumbling. All right, the next technique is scribbling, not to be confused with scumbling. Okay. So scribbling, it's actually not like normal scribbling. It's actually kind of an intentional scribble, okay? So you could also call this like a tangle, okay? So notice I'm kind of going back and forth. I'm almost creating like figure eights, kind of, okay? And the difference between this and normal scribbling is when you're normally scribbling, you're just going like this, okay? It doesn't matter what direction you go, you're not thinking about it, okay? That's scribbling. This is intentional scribbling, okay? So I am thinking about it and I'm kind of doing a repetitive motion with my hand, okay? And again, if you want certain areas to be darker, you go over them more, okay? All right. With pen, okay, a lot of people like to use repetitive shape and line to create designs. That's also a great way to create visual texture, okay? So maybe, you know, you're creating like a cobblestone street, okay? You're creating visual texture just by the repetitive circles. Okay, we know that these are going to be stones if they're a street, and we can imagine that they would feel bumpy, okay? For like things like hair and fur, you might do short and long lines. You might want to do like thin and thick lines, okay? Especially if you're doing something like water, okay? So one thing I want you guys to play around with is just creating different types of line, shape, and pattern with your pen. And if you look up Zen doodles or Zen tangles, you'll find a lot of different types of line and pattern and shape that you can practice in addition to these more basic techniques, okay? And we're gonna be practicing some different techniques, and I'll show you some more examples in class as well, okay? All right, so now you know some basic pen techniques. One last thing before we move on. When I do a pen drawing, sometimes I just freehand it, which means I'm looking at the picture and I'm just drawing it with my pen without a pencil, okay? Other times, I like to use pencil first, and I'll look at my picture for my visual reference, and I'll draw out whatever it is that I want to create in pen. And then I'll go back in and I'll trace over my lines, okay? All the little lines that I made for my preliminary sketch, okay? And that's kind of what I recommend when you're working with pen, is to just do it really lightly in pencil first, and then just go over your pencil lines, and then you can erase your pencil lines. Here's an example of one that I did very lightly in pencil, and then I went back in and I did it in pen. And notice that I used cross hatching, I used hatching, I used stippling, and I used some repetition and pattern. All right, folks, one last thing. Another kind of good way to play around with these techniques is to choose one thing to draw and try to draw it in a bunch of different ways using your pens. All right, happy art making, my friends, and I will talk to you more later.